It's Lou Dobbs Sunday. Now, in for Lou Dobbs with a report about the economy. Here's Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. I'm very privileged to announce my next guest, which is Jason Miller. Jason and I have been colleagues and friends for practically 2 decades. Jason is most famous, obviously, for being the campaign manager for Donald J. Trump. And Jason has done really a truly outstanding job. This has been an incredible campaign from the very start, getting through, all of these Republican challengers, a strong field of candidates, by the way, Jason, people like Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and Tim Scott and others. So I just want to say congratulations for what you've done so far, and it's looking good for the future.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. And obviously someone who's worked with you very closely over the last, as you mentioned, about 2 decades. I don't feel like I'm that old, but I guess maybe I am. But, when we see the stakes that are on the line here with this 2024 election, and you and I frequently talk about tax policy, we talk about economic policy, we talk about growth. How do we go and get this country turned around? Everything comes back to growth. And it doesn't matter whether it's entitlements, whether it's about deficit, whether it's about debt. Any aspect that we go through, everything goes back to growth. And right now, we have stagflation. And this is just a situation where we do not have the economic growth that we need. People are suffering from it. And so this is so much bigger than even Donald Trump or Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. This is about the actual standard of living and the way of life in America.
Well, as you know, Jason, because you and I have talked a lot about this, we have this document we've put together we call the chart book that I've shown President Trump, and he's over the moon about it. And we call it the Trump boom versus the Bidenomics bust. And so we look at, I think, 28 different economic measures in this, Jason. And out of the 28, Trump outperforms Biden on 24 of the 28 variables. It's a slam dunk.
It really is. And, part of the thing, too, is when you look at Joe Biden and the moves that he's trying to make with regard to 2024, he's trying to essentially buy votes, whether it be the student loan
right.
whether it be the drop in the bucket releases from the strategic petroleum reserves, things of this nature that are market warping at best, socialism at worst, and everything that Biden does with giving away money and doing more of the class warfare game makes the situation only worse for Americans. And so many people take a look and say, wait a minute, with Donald Trump, everybody was better off. That's just the way. It doesn't matter what classification you're in or how you define yourself or what community you live in or geographic or anything else. Everybody was better off. But now under Biden, only the top 20% are doing better. And so if you're somebody who has to actually borrow money, if you have a mortgage like most people in the country, if you're someone who has monthly credit card debt like most people in the country, if you're in the 80% who actually worry about what happens from one paycheck to the next, or maybe have a little bit of a cushion but not much, then you're really feeling the squeeze. It's only the top 20% of people who don't have to worry about borrowing money or don't have to worry about mortgages or things of that nature that are doing fine. This is a fundamental crisis in this country where, there are people, Steve, and I'm sure you have anecdotal examples like this as well, people who I always thought were very comfortably middle class, thought they were kind of well off. Just like, you know what, we can't really do a vacation this year. Do we do, is this a gas or groceries type situation? And that's scary. I think a lot of Americans are very concerned about just where is the country going, and they want to change. Yeah. They want to go back to what we had.
That's Jason Miller, who is the expert campaign manager for Donald J. Trump and has run an amazing campaign. I was saying earlier on the show, Jason, that, I'm upper middle income. I'm not a millionaire or billionaire. But I'm now essentially, when you take account inflation and taxes, for every dollar I earn, the government or inflation are taking half of it away from me. And so, now like I'm upper middle income. But this is a real strain, and there's something wrong with the country, and the government's taking half of your money away from you.
Well, it is, and this might be, actually people in the WABC listener zone would know this because of New York. But, Steve, I think you and I both are in the Northern Virginia area, and it is staggering to see the number of what is actually considered middle class in, say, Northern Virginia. And I shudder to think what it even is in the Big Apple. even is in the Big Apple for all the listeners in New York. But in many of these places, the middle class is literally be between a household income of 200, 300,000, or people who are in this range who are saying they're living paycheck to paycheck because everything is so expensive. Mortgages up 90%. Yeah. You see the interest rates of where they're going. Food is through the roof. Everything has just become so much more expensive, and the wages just aren't keeping up. And that's people have fallen behind on the wage growth and the real wage impact under Biden. It's gone in the wrong direction.
Well, the statistic that I always use with the president is incomes were up $6,500 for the middle class in Trump's term, and they're down $2,500 under Biden's term. So it really, comes down to the old Reagan question: are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Well, and that's exactly, and people are saying, no, actually, we're worse off.
Right.
But to give people some hope, so many of the things that Biden did were executive orders and things he could do with the stroke of a pen, where literally it was day one that Biden screwed it up, but on day one, President Trump can reverse it. And if you think back to 2016, the markets started to move as soon as President Trump won, even before he took office, because so many businesses were assuming there'd be a massive tax hike. Bad things were coming, so they put money aside. They weren't investing it back in the companies. They weren't hiring or expanding. But now, with President Trump, not only do we know that he can put the plan into action right away, here's the other good thing. I tell you, he has such good people that he can bring in for these key positions in his government or even in his cabinet. I mean, think of energy. I think of someone like someone like a Doug Burgum, who I hope will be part of the administration. Yes. People who really get it, who know how to get the economy going, literally within minutes. And that's why I feel hopeful and optimistic. But boy, Steve, we got to make it.
We got a lot of work to do.
We got a lot of work to do.
So let's switch gears for a minute, Jason. And the question that I get asked all the time. And I haven't seen the president in a couple of months because he's been in the trial, and they haven't really let him get out much. But you're around him every day, and after that verdict, I don't know what kind of spirits is he in. John Catsimatidis says that he had dinner with him that night, and he was optimistic and forward looking. And so tell us, is this withering away his optimism, or is he still the old Donald Trump that we love?
He's superhuman. I don't know how he does it. I mean, coming out of there, it's always he's told that he's getting this guilty verdict at 34 out of 34 counts, and he walks out of the courtroom, and we do our little huddle before he goes to the cameras. Yeah. He's ready to go. He's ready to come out swinging. He knows what he wants to say. He's telling us what he wants us to go and amplify on our end. And he's ready to go and take this thing on.
Thank you, Jason. That's Jason Miller of the Trump campaign. We'll be right back.
It's Lou Dobbs Sunday.
This is Greg Kelly for Priority Gold. What does it mean to be America's precious metals dealer? It means that you're in touch with the hearts and minds of those who love this country, value our freedom, and want to protect the future. Priority Gold is that precious metals dealer. They've helped thousands of Americans back their retirement with solid gold and silver. Call Priority Gold at 888-506-6439. Receive free shipping, free storage, a free investment guide, and one of the best purchase experiences in the industry. Call now or go to PriorityGold.com.
Hi, it's Lou Dobbs for Priority Gold, America's precious metals dealer. These are volatile times with high inflation, soaring debt, wars on multiple continents, and rising financial stress. Central banks are buying gold to diversify their reserves, so are many Americans. Call Priority Gold and find out how precious metals can help you diversify your portfolio. They're highly rated and happy to help. Call 1-866-303-6357 or get a free gold guide at PriorityGoldGuide.com. That's PriorityGoldGuide.com.
America, We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. By honoring your sacred vocation of education, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. At Grand Canyon University, our online bachelor's, master's, and doctoral education degree programs allow you to balance online coursework with observational and hands-on experience in the field. Find your purpose at GCU. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
It's Lou Dobbs Sunday. Now, in for Lou Dobbs with a report about the economy. Here's Larry Kudlow.
Welcome back, everybody. We got John Carney of Breitbart News, co-author of the great Breitbart Business Digest every day. You got to read it. It's must-reading. John, welcome back. So, a couple of things I got. The Fed meeting this week, Jay Powell and so forth, no rate cuts. Some people are saying they were actually suggesting they're more restrained because they raised their inflation target. But I was just interested, like the stock market had no particular response to it. Bond rates fell, okay. But then again, this little mystery, Jay Powell was talking about why the jobs numbers weren't as strong as people think. And he seemed to imply, I don't know if he said it exactly, but the household surveys, sort of leaning towards small business, have been falling significantly. And the payroll survey of big business has been rising. And Powell threw sort of cold water on the data. And I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that. I couldn't remember if we talked about this on the TV show. But
I think we mentioned it briefly. But, yeah, so one of the things is that we have had these two surveys that make up the jobs report every month, going in opposite directions for a while now. And people keep expecting eventually for them to converge, and they haven't. And it's a bit of a mystery. Nobody knows exactly why this is happening. It's very unusual. And I frankly found it kind of reassuring that Powell didn't try to totally blow off the divergence and say and admit, yeah, you know what? Maybe we don't exactly know what's going on. And the real trouble is, Larry, that there's not a better thing out there. These are the best numbers we have, and yet they're telling us two very different stories.
Was it you that said that the Bureau of Labor Statistics, somebody said the BLS was going to actually cut back the funding of the household survey?
Well, what's happened is that it's actually, ironically, this is Taylor Riggs is the one who pointed this out to us. And one of the things that's happening is that it is just because of the inflation, it has become more expensive for the Department of Labor to run the household survey. And so they are cutting back on the number of households that they actually survey. Look, I am not a big government spender, Larry, but this is probably one of the things that we should authorize a little bit more spending for, because we don't want to let these numbers get worse. They're having a problem now because survey results are down. People aren't answering them the way they used to. We really don't want to let this get worse quality, because it becomes really hard to try to run an economy when you can't trust the data.
Well, that's a good point. John Carney, was there any significant thing in the Fed forecast? These median forecasts that they put out. Was there anything that caught your eye?
I thought two things. One, the one that you mentioned, which is the climbing of the long-term, long-run federal funds rate. This has been around 2.5% for years now. It hit that number back in 2019. It has never gone above that until last month. It actually climbed to 2.6. This time it climbed to 2.8. The head of the Cleveland Fed, who is leaving, her term is up in, I think, the end of this month, said that she actually raised hers to 3%. So this number, I think, is going higher, and that's good. because it's an acknowledgement that we're not getting back to the kind of low interest rate environment we had. We are running fiscal deficits that basically mean that we can't get back to it because that is an inflationary pressure in the economy. And as long as the government is spending as much money as it is, we're not going to get back down to where we used to be. And this is really the first time in years that the Fed has acknowledged that. So that I thought was very good. I also love the fact that they communicated just one. Wall Street said maybe they'll go from 3 cuts to just 2. Everybody on Wall Street agreed on that, except for Breitbart Business Digest. We said no, they're going to go to 1. I don't think they'll actually cut at all, but they teared it back all the way to 1. They probably had to do that. Going from 3 to 0 would have been too big of a change, and it would have been too much of an admission about how wrong they were in the beginning of the year. So I think they're trying to walk the market off of these cuts.
Well, I think if they cut in September, a month before the election, I mean, they'll hear it from Trump. It looks so phony, juicing the economy to reelect Biden. It seems to me they should wait. Otherwise, as though everything else is so politicized in our society, especially the justice system. Now we have the monetary system. I mean, right before September would be, 5 weeks before? That just doesn't sound like a good idea to me.
It would be completely insane for them to do it. I don't think they'll do it. I think Jay Powell actually cares about the public perception of the Federal Reserve. People don't realize it, but the surveys actually show people are paying attention to the Fed. It seems like a technical thing, but people do listen to what the Fed says. Plus, Biden won't do them any favors. If they cut in September, Joe Biden is going to say, see, I told you I would defeat inflation. The Fed just acknowledged that we have. Don't worry about that. Vote for Biden. So he is going to politicize a cut if they do it. It would be very dangerous, not just Trump. I think Republican voters and Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill will see this as very dangerous. And they will try to put if Trump gets elected and we have Republican majorities, and yet the Fed has seemed to have tried to skew it for Biden, I think we will end up with legislation to try to pull back some of the discretion of the Fed, and they don't want that. So I think, look, if they can cut in September, which I don't think they will, the economy will be ready for that. Why not wait until December? No, Jay Powell even said this. If you look at the history books 10 years from now, no difference will be made whether they, in terms of how the economy develops, whether they cut in September or December. So cut in September would really actually be fairly characterized as a political move to help elect Joe Biden. So they shouldn't do it, and I don't think they will.
The last one, John, we got about 45 seconds. The consumer confidence numbers continue to drop. I think you said 7 months in a row in your latest Business Digest. What's up with that?
Well, look, people saw that inflation is rising a lot. Plus, there's one other thing. If you look deeper into the numbers, it shows actually that Democrats are getting very upset. They think they are going to lose this election. And so when they are asked how the economy will do in the future, their expectations number has dropped down a lot, because they obviously hate the idea that Trump's going to get elected. So there's a partisan angle in this, but it's Democrats actually getting worried that they're going to lose the election.
And the Hispanic numbers are very poor.
Yes. When you look at these numbers, a lot of people haven't looked very closely, but the Hispanic voter numbers for approval of Biden's economy are worse than the white numbers. Hispanic voters are and plus their care about the economy numbers. In other words, when you ask them how important is the economy in this election, it is huge. It's higher than the white number. So Joe Biden has a really, really big problem with Hispanic voters going into this election. Democrats cannot win without a supersized Hispanic vote for them. So they are very worried about that.
All right. John Carney, Breitbart, co-author of the Breitbart Business Digest. Every day, must read. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Folks, we'll take a quick break. On the other side, the great New York Congresswoman Claudia Tenney is going to tell us about the Trump visit to the Republican House Conference. I'm Kudlow. Be right back.
It's Lou Dobbs Sunday. Now in for Lou Dobbs with a report about the economy. Here's Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. I am your host, Stephen Moore, economist, and I want to bring in as my next guest Jonathan Williams, who is the vice president at the group called ALEC, which represents about 3,000 conservative state legislators around the country. ALEC is an indispensable organization. And in addition to being an executive at ALEC, Jonathan is also the co-author of a group called a report that comes out annually called Rich State, Poor State, a ranking of the states in terms of their economies and their policies. Jonathan, thanks for joining this afternoon.
Hey, great to be back with you, my friend.
Okay, so let's get right down to it, Jonathan. Your report is out for 2024. And you're having your big conference coming up next month, and I believe you're going to be in Denver, where you'll present a lot of these results. But I wanted to give a little sneak preview, if I may, to our audience. And as I think a lot of people in our audience know, that I co-authored that report with you and Arthur Laffer. But let's start with the best. You know, we do the rankings every year. Give us the top 3 or 4.
Well, you know, Steve, this has been a really consistent story at the top of the Rich States, Poor States rankings, because for all 17 editions for our economic outlook ranking, which includes things like taxes and regulation and labor policy, things we know matter for growth, Utah has been the number one state for each and every one of these 17 years.
Every year.
It's been an incredible track record. It really has. I mean, nobody has been able to dethrone them.
So that is pretty amazing. How many years have we done this now? 16, 17, something like that?
17 as of this year. And, you know, from the start, though, I mean, it's kind of interesting to say, you know, in year one, it was when John Huntsman Jr. was governor of Utah, they created a flat tax. And they were one of the first states in America to go from a progressive income tax to a single rate flat tax. One of the best things states can do if you keep your income tax. Of course, as Steve, you and I both talk about all the time, the best flat tax is a 0% rate flat tax and just get rid of the income tax altogether for economic growth. But Utah from year one did that. And then they come back with our good friends like Senate President Stuart Adams on the ALEC board and many other of these great legislators keep cutting the rates. And it's just been so impressive between that and their property tax reform and pension reform. Utah's been an economic powerhouse. And by the way, they are a right to work state, right? Their right to work. I mean, they've just got so many great things, but I mean, it's not just us saying they're number one. You know, they are the fastest growing state in America over the last decade when you look at population growth. And even I think U.S. News and World Report said now for the second year in a row, they're number one for their economic measure. But we like to say we were for Utah before they were for Utah. We've had about 15 years head start.
And by the way, Utah is also the youngest state in the nation in terms of the average age. So they have kids in Utah, something in the northeastern states where so many of our listeners are, you know, there's just a shortage of children. Okay, give us the 2 or 3 other top achievers.
Well, and so it's a regional feel in the top 3 anyways. And I think there's a lot of competition between these states and that Utah's been a pace setter. But then right behind it at number 2 is you have Idaho, a state that has also become a flat tax much more recently in 2022. But a lot of deregulation, a lot of tax cutting there. Another big growth state that they're just getting tons of Americans voting with their feet coming out of California and other big government states towards states like Utah and Idaho. And then number 3, one of my personal favorites to talk about is Arizona, in a state that has become a flat tax state of only 2.5%. Arizona with a 1-vote Republican margin in the Senate and a 1-vote Republican margin in the House. And then you had former Governor Doug Ducey. They created this flat tax. They did universal school choice, which is, I know you and I have talked about that a ton over the last year with our Education Freedom Alliance, that Committee to Unleash Prosperity and ALEC have been partnering on. Arizona combines the best of both worlds, where you have economic freedom and education freedom, just like Utah has done. And so really a mountain western feel to the top 3 for the best economic outlook states in America.
And all these states are doing really well economically, too. I mean, anybody who's been to Arizona or Utah or Idaho, you know, you see so much of the growth in these states. I mean, these ideas really work. Okay. Now, I hate to do it, but we have to talk, Jonathan, about the states that are at the bottom of the heap. And why don't you give us the starting from which state came out worse this year?
Well, Steve, bad news here for your listeners because it's actually New York that comes in dead last.
50.
50th out of 50.
God. Tell me what they're doing wrong in New York.
Well, you look at the resume there for New York, and, we actually spent tax day, my team and I, in Albany, talking with the legislators about how do you dig out of the hole, right? And the first way to do that is stop digging it deeper, obviously, and stop passing these ridiculous new tax increases that are being proposed and new regulations. But you look at New York, and it's some of the highest income taxes across the board, some of the highest business taxes, some of the highest property taxes, of course, not a right-to-work state, egregious high levels of minimum wage, things, a policy that you've written about for decades, Steve, that sounds good, but is the absolute worst thing you can do is a training wage for young people coming out of high school and college looking to find their first job. So tons of big government policies. And, of course, you look at the overall spending and why these taxes need to be so high in New York. Yeah. It is the spending is abysmal. I mean, unbelievably high spending in the state and city of New York.
So, Jonathan, we only have a couple minutes left to appreciate you taking some time out of your busy weekend. We've got a lot of listeners in New Jersey. How did they do? A
little bit better, but still bottom 5 or 6 states there. New Jersey comes in at 46th out of the 50 states. I mean, not a surprise. Vermont at 49th, Illinois, your home state, at 48th, and California at 47th. So not a lot of surprises because it's
a lot of work to be done.
Philosophy.
So, Jonathan, I think I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal this week that New Jersey just raised their business tax rate, and I thought New Jersey already had one of the highest business tax rates. Am I getting that wrong, or?
No, you're 100% right. New Jersey already had one of the very highest business taxes, and that corporate income tax surcharge that was supposed to go away. They're raising taxes. They raised them during the pandemic. I think the only state in America during the pandemic to raise taxes. Now they're doing it again.
Amazing. Oh, Jonathan, we've got a lot of work to do in these northeastern states, no question about it. By the way, California is also a laggard as well, right?
Yeah, they are absolutely 47th. And the ballot initiative that was supposed to try to tackle these high taxes, it sounds like the California Supreme Court just tossed it off the ballot, as you may have seen in the just last 24 hours.
Amazing. I mean, it's just so sad that these high tax states and the high spending states and the high regulation states just don't get it. I mean, they're doing so much damage to their own citizens. That was Jonathan Williams, folks, who is the vice president at the group called ALEC. And the report, I want everybody to go look it up on the web, is called Rich States, Poor States. Full disclosure, I'm one of the co-authors of that with the great Jonathan Williams and Arthur Laffer. If you live in New Jersey, if you live in Connecticut, if you live in New York, you got to either get your government to reform itself or you got to get out of these places. I guess that's the message. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining.
It's Lou Dobbs Sunday. It's Lou Dobbs Sunday. Now, in for Lou Dobbs with a report about the economy. Here's Larry Kudlow.
Welcome back, folks. We're going to do a little money in politics. Liz Peek, Fox News contributor, syndicated columnist Steve Moore, committed Unleashed Prosperity Hotline, and WABC radio host of More Money, following this show on many of these same stations. Welcome back, kids. Liz Peek, I want to begin with you. Big interview with billionaire investor Stanley Druckenmiller, a very smart guy, very successful investor. Quote, I'd give him an F. Billionaire investor Druckenmiller slams Bidenomics, questions why the U.S. still spending like we're in the Great Depression. And he also blames the Fed for enabling all this spending. But he calls out President Biden's ongoing efforts to cancel student debt, which has seen billions of dollars in loans wiped out for borrowers, as well as a proposed rule change within Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that would let borrowers take out a second mortgage while keeping their cheap pandemic-era rates on their first mortgage. Is why we're still spending like we're still in the Great Depression is beyond me. It's kind of beyond me, too, Liz. How about you?
I think it's beyond a lot of people, but here's the problem. A lot of Americans like all the things that Joe Biden wants to give away, and they're not pushing back hard enough because the sensible voices in his administration or the Fed have not sung out and said, stop. I mean, Jay Powell knows better. Janet Yellen knows better. But they have enabled, is exactly the right word, the president to go on spending and spending in a desperate effort to buy votes. Why is he wanting to perpetuate the student loan program, which, by the way, the Supreme Court has said is illegal, and that, by the way, a majority of Americans don't like because young people have turned away from Joe Biden. They've turned their backs on him, and he is desperate to bring that very important Democrat cohort back into the fold. It is really disgusting, Larry. But, you know, and I also I don't want to go on. This is my favorite rant. I don't want to go to extremes. But honestly, when you look at and everyone should just go online. The Fed has really nice charts up showing American spending, government spending relative to the economy. This is national emergency territory. We have never been here before in terms of what the government's spending relative to GDP. And here's the main thing. We're not in an emergency, and we haven't been. Okay, so Steve Moore, you're one. I wish you'd push back harder on this, by the way, just as an aside. But you have to explain. Jared Bernstein, the chief economist over there, should explain. You have a 4% unemployment rate. Okay, now that's up from 3.4. I understand that, but it's still historically low. Right. You have a 4% unemployment rate, and you're running a $2 trillion budget deficit. My question to you is, would John Maynard Keynes agree with that policy?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, Larry, because your friend and mine, Arthur Laffer, and I have just penned a piece that hopefully will be in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, and it's called How Modern Monetary Theory Backfired on the Democrats. And for those who don't know what modern monetary theory is, it's basically Keynesianism on steroids. It basically says the U.S. government can just borrow and borrow and borrow and spend and spend and spend and spend as much as it wants to, and there will be no negative consequences to it because we're the world reserve currency. Well, we've had a grand experiment in that now for the last 3 years, as Liz was just explaining. We borrowed $6 trillion in 3 years. That's more than we borrowed basically to fund, in real terms, the World War II. That's how much we borrowed. And so what has been the effect of all that spending and borrowing? It's been runaway inflation. And so you've got this. So what's happening is, it's like hamsters on a wheel. They keep running faster and faster and faster, but they're not catching up because inflation is growing faster than their incomes are. And that's the reason, in my opinion, Larry, why Americans are so angry. Yeah, their incomes are up. And Biden always says, look, their incomes are up to 17%, but the prices are up 21%. And the prices for everything from groceries to rent to gasoline are up 35 or 40%. So it didn't work, and it has backfired on the Democrats.
I mean, I don't think it gets near enough attention, this combination of 4% unemployment and a $2 trillion deficit. And if you look at the CBO baseline, basically that's what you got as far as the eye can see, $2 trillion a year. And you're not in a national emergency, as Stanley Druckenmiller. I mean, I know Druckenmiller. He's a common sense guy. He probably leans right of center, but he's not a political guy. He's a financial guy. He's a great investor. The old Duquesne investment. Now it's the family office. Anyway, you're running Depression-era deficits, or you might say, pandemic-era deficits, but there's no end to it. And you have to ask, what is the common sense view of a policy like that? I mean, it's a question that Trump must ask during the debate. This is runaway spending and runaway borrowing for what? For what? Liz, I will tell you this. I don't think people want it. In other words, this is FDR-type politics. Spend and spend, tax and tax, elect and elect. But my thought here is, this is the old Democratic coalition. You're going to spend your way to victory. You're going to buy votes. Okay, I get that. Student loans, you're going to buy votes. Mortgages, you're going to buy votes. Every day comes up with a new gimmick to buy votes. I don't think people want it. You look at the polls, people understand the linkage between spending, debt, and inflation, and their paychecks, which are shrinking. They don't want this. Biden has given them a dish of the old New Deal that they don't want.
I hope you're right, Larry. It worries me that FDR was reelected 4 times. So,
Well, he was in a depression. This is not he had a 20% unemployment rate. It's now 4.
I get that. And by the way, that is the singular issue that Republicans should be talking about. But guess what? They can't, because they've been the ones, Republicans in Congress, and to a lesser degree President Trump, who've signed off on some of these enormous spending bills. So the Republicans are stronger on this than Democrats, for sure, but they are not willing yet to make this a signature cause. But I'll tell you what, if, as the odds makers now suggest might happen, the Republicans have a clean sweep and they control Congress and the White House next year, one of the things that has got to happen, they have to go into the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Act and then hundreds of billions of dollars in the stupidly called Inflation Reduction Act. They've got to take some of that money back. They've got to take some of that funding off the table. However you do that, Congress can do that, because what's going on in terms of hundreds of billions of dollars going into climate initiatives, boy, Americans don't want that. Yeah. And they don't want, I think, to see that fail, because it is going to fail.
Steve, to this point, I don't mean to jump in, Liz, but it's such a key. I want to give you the flywheel on this. Reconciliation, which is a 51-49 vote in the Senate, Steve Moore. And, as preparations are being made, planning for 2025 reconciliation, because Liz is right. The betting markets are predicting a Republican sweep. And the $1 trillion plus misnamed Inflation Reduction Act should be wiped out.
Yes.
Wiped out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hook, line, and sinker. Wiped out. The country hates it.
Yeah. I mean, just giving you an example of something we wrote about in the hotline this week is this crazy program. I don't know, Larry and Liz, whether you've been following this, to build these charging stations around the country for EVs. Yeah. And it was a $7 billion, I'm not making this up, $7.5 billion program. It passed 3 years ago, and they've so far built 8 charging stations. So that doesn't seem like it was a very good buy. I mean, you guys are exactly right that we should, in a rational world, be running a balanced budget, not running these huge
surplus
deficits, maybe even surpluses. But I wanted to call your attention, Larry, to one thing that's relevant to what we've been talking about. We know what the Democratic plan is to try to slash this deficit. It is to basically raise taxes through the roof. Yeah. That's part 2 of Bidenomics. So front page of the Wall Street Journal today saying Democrats see the chance of repealing the Trump tax cuts as a way to, quote, reset fiscal policy. They think that tax and spend is going to make America prosperous. So they're going to double the capital gains tax, increase the business taxes, tax unrealized capital gains. This would be a cyanide pill for the U.S. economy.
Let's take a break here. And Liz, I apologize for interrupting you, but I wanted to get that reconciliation point in, because it's actually real live planning. Look, Steve Moore runs the Republican Party, so you have to remind him of this stuff from time to time. Let's take a break. I want to talk about the tax cuts, and I want to also talk about this incredible cost, which keeps creeping higher and higher and is phony baloney if I ever saw it. So, folks, we're talking to great Liz Peek of Fox News, and we're talking to Steve Moore of Committee to Unleash Prosperity Hotline and More Money. I'm Kudlow. Be right back.
Hi, it's Lou Dobbs for Priority Gold, America's precious metals dealer. These are volatile times with high inflation, soaring debt, wars on multiple continents, and rising financial stress. Central banks are buying gold to diversify their reserves, so are many Americans. Call Priority Gold and find out how precious metals can help you diversify your portfolio. They're highly rated and happy to help. Call 1-866-303-6357 or get a free gold guide at PriorityGoldGuide.com. That's Priority PriorityGoldGuide.com.